Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Hebba Youssef.
The expectation around mental health and support and being a genuine version of yourself at work is wildly different than it was 5 or 6 years ago. It is night and day. And I think we have come to this place where I feel like a lot of HR professionals and a lot of leaders feel like they are stepping into the role of mental health professional, and that is not the correct solution.
Hello, hi, welcome back to your favorite podcast on the face of the earth. I'm Hebba, your host and resident HR hater. Wow, I can't even do my own intro. I'm Hebba, your host and a resident HR hater. Actually, I'm their resident HR hater. I'm going to move on. This season's theme is the HR evolution. Every episode, we're talking about what this job could look like in the future, and things to keep in mind. And today's topic is a pretty big one, trauma-informed HR. Because over 70% of adults have experienced some sort of trauma, not just some employees, not just a small population you'll never encounter. The majority of humans sitting in your all hands, your one-on-ones, your exit interviews, your team meetings, they've experienced some form of trauma. And most HR functions are built like that number is actually still zero. So today I'm talking to Stephanie Lemek, former HR executive turned founder of the Wounded Workforce, about what it actually looks like to build a trauma-informed workplace. Stephanie, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. It is so great to finally be here.
I know, it's been like a minute. We see each other like a few times a year, like twice a year, sometimes. Yeah, so it was a good time. And we've always had such good conversations. Like, I had so much fun. You were at Transform this past year, right? I didn't make that up.
Yes.
I was like, I didn't make that up. I saw you. I took a picture
I was there.
You were next to me when I was like, my feet are broken. I need to buy a pair of shoes. And then I never bought a pair of shoes. I just continued with my broken feet.
You didn't?
No.
Oh my gosh.
Listeners, I accidentally only packed like heels. I don't know what I was thinking. That's usually not my vibe. But I packed really cute heels. And then by day 3 of Transform, I was like, my feet feel broken. I need to go buy a pair of like flip-flops. Never went to buy them. I just made it through.
Vegas is so tricky because it's like, oh, everything's in this one hotel, except you forget like all of the like hotel resorts are like 1.5 city blocks.
It was the most foolish mistake I've made in recent years. So I should tell you a lot about how I feel about how broken my feet were. I am asking every guest this season the same question. It's my opening question. What is something about how you work now that would have surprised you 5 years ago?
Biggest thing that surprises me about how I work now, since I am an entrepreneur, is every morning I make time to go to my workout, whether it's hot yoga or Pilates, and I do it at like 9. So it's kind of amazing.
And you miss all the traffic. Well, I don't know how much traffic there is where you are, but that would be like prime time for me to miss a decent amount of traffic in the DMV.
It's like so amazing because it's like I can get up, I can have a cup of coffee, I can walk the dog, and then go work out and not feel like either, like it was always a struggle when I was like working in an office. I would either have to get up so early to work out, or I would try and work out after work, which I am not an afternoon evening workout girly.
Me neither.
So
Me neither.
This is like the greatest thing that ever happened to me is my 9 a.m. workouts.
I love that. And 5 years. Yeah, you're right. Now that I work from home, like I definitely do workouts at interesting hours. When I was in an office, I always had to do them before because I could never do them after.
Never do them after. Yeah.
I'm not interested in that life. I am so pumped to talk today about you've been doing so much great work around like trauma-informed workplaces. You've taught me personally so much. And you talk a lot about like this light bulb moment you had mid-pandemic where you were realizing a lot of trauma responses were showing up in your own work. And I kind of wanted to start the episode there. Like, can you walk us through that? What did it feel like being like this career HR person and like missing some of these responses in yourself?
It was kind of wild, to be honest. I mean, I think it is a not uncommon story at this point, talking to HR professionals and having a really surreal experience during COVID. And it's like looking back on it, it's kind of weird because it's just like, I mean, I worked for like a team that was not, it wasn't huge. They weren't like first responders. We weren't doing anything that was like an essential service. We were just like working remotely and it worked just fine. And it was still like so incredibly stressful. It was so overwhelming. It was so hard. And, I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression at this point. And during the pandemic, like a lot of that was kind of coming back up for me. So I was like, I'd really like to talk to someone. So I started talking with a therapist and she would say things to me like, oh, like, do people just feel like they can just come into your office anytime? Like, why is someone walking into your office while you're in therapy? I was like, oh, girl, like, what? You're right. And then, I'm notoriously, at least when I was in house, I think kind of still kind of a tough cookie. Like, I hold people accountable, I push back, all of these things. And I remember one of my peers screamed at me during this time. And I kind of just shut down. And I'm like telling my therapist, I'm like, why did I do that? This was so weird. And she's like, yeah, it's a trauma response. Like your body is reacting to a threat. And so it's like shutting down and it's going into like people pleasing or fawn mode to stop this from happening. And I'm sitting here like, I'm the head of HR. I've been doing this for 2 decades, like on purpose too. I'm like one of those weirdos who got into HR on purpose. And like, how did I miss this? And I missed it in myself. And I'm like, okay, so this is showing up for me. And I didn't notice. And I have the privilege of being focused on how people interact at work and the privilege of access to a mental health professional. I'm like, this is kind of a big deal. And then the light bulb moments kind of piled on from there. And that's how we got to the wounded workforce.
Wow. I first of all, thank you for sharing about the your anxiety and depression diagnosis. I feel like we also 2020 kind of pulled back the lens on a lot of stuff, but I think since then too, people have been like, way more open and vulnerable about what it is they're dealing with, which I'm like honored to know you and feel blessed that you were willing to share with this audience. I'm also glad that we as a society are normalizing these conversations around I am dealing with something because I used to have a boss that would be like, never talk about anything personal in the workplace. And I'm kind of the person in the workplace now where I'm like, yeah, I was just like grieving. Sorry, I was grieving like the anniversary of my dad. So I was like sobbing in like a CVS aisle. Like I'm just telling, and people are like, that could be oversharing. And I'm like, no, I think it's really important that we talk about the things we're dealing with because you start to make people feel like they're not in isolation, right? I feel like when I open up about my grief or the things I'm dealing with, a lot of people are more willing to share too. And it does help me think about how can I show up as like a better colleague to some of my peers, but also like a better HR person because it's not anymore like you leave all your trauma at the door and you walk into work and you're trauma free. Like that's ridiculous. But we were pretending like that for so long.
I mean, it never was. Like, even, a lot of times we talk about people are good at compartmentalizing and not bringing certain things to the workplace. Or I'm like, I won't talk about things at work. Well, I mean, if you're going to have a trauma response, that is an automatic response in your amygdala, your lizard brain, as I like to call it. It is your body's way of going in protection mode. And that looks different for different people. It could be fight. So if someone like loses their temper,
Mm,
we don't know anyone who gets really upset at work and loses their temper or anything. Um, or they leave. They're like out of here. Or there's fawn people pleasing is one that I actually think is a super, super common.
yes.
But we don't recognize it and then freeze. Like, okay, I'm just gonna like sit here and dissociate. Those are automatic responses in our body. Even if you are compartmentalizing, you're not. You're not actually doing that. And I think there's like this real myth around like leave your problems at the door.
Ugh.
I remember starting out, it's like leave all of that at the door and like just come in and work. And that's bullshit. Like it's not true. It doesn't work for anybody.
Yeah. It definitely does not work for me. What is the difference between a workplace that is actually trauma aware, which like they know the things, and one that is actually trauma informed, which I feel like is the workplace is built around being trauma informed.
Yeah. So trauma aware is super easy. It's that we're aware of what trauma is. And I would hope it also would be the awareness around the prevalence of trauma in society. And being trauma aware is half of being trauma informed. When I talk about the prevalence of trauma in society, 70% of US adults are raising their own hand. They're self identifying and saying, I have had one or more traumatic experience in my lifetime. That's pretty staggering. Those are
Yeah.
the like raising your hand and saying yes. I almost fell out of my chair. I do a lot of work in blue collar and male dominated fields as well. Men are actually 10% more likely to self identify as having a traumatic experience in their lifetime. So, in terms of like kind of flipping this as like a soft, warm, fuzzy conversation, kind of flipping that on its head, this is something that's impacting your workforce, if not them directly, someone that they care about, someone in their lives. And so that understanding of what trauma is and awareness to the prevalence, that's trauma awareness. To actually be trauma informed requires us to take action. And the action is, it sounds really simple. Of course, it becomes more complex as we start to build out our processes, our systems, our culture. But it really means we actively avoid re traumatizing survivors.
Mm.
And number two, we actively minimize harm. So if you want to make it really easy, we're just looking to actively minimize harm and have understanding around what things may, activate trauma survivors, what might be something they're really sensitive about, and make sure we're thoughtful about that and how we are acting, leading, building processes and systems. And we really use the concept of the seven principles of trauma informed workplaces, and these are based on the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's original principles of trauma informed care.
Mm. How, like, let's say someone's trying to be like a good leader. Like, I always try to be like a good manager. How would I even find out? Like, I understand like being trauma informed, but how would I even know potentially what's triggering someone on my team?
Yeah, it's really hard. And that's one thing that I think it's really difficult for people is you're like, okay, I want to avoid activating or triggering one of my team
Yeah.
members. So you figure like, oh, I need to know about their trauma. We actually don't.
It's really
And
none of my
honest,
business, actually. Genuinely, like, I should not. It's none of my
it's not
business.
our business. Also, do you really want to invite any more people to trauma dump on you as a
No.
leader, as an HR professional?
Also, like,
Because my answer is no.
what if I do more trauma to them as they're telling me
Yeah,
about their trauma? Like, I am not trained in how to appropriately respond to someone. Like, I think I would do a good job, but that's not 100% guarantee. Like, they could tell me something and I could have the absolute worst response and
right.
re-traumatize them.
Correct. And so like that's the thing. That's where what I love about trauma informed practices, it's, this big sounding thing. And it makes people think, well, like, I don't want to be a therapist. I'm not qualified to be a counselor or provide any diagnosis or support. It's like, correct. Please don't. Like, do not do that. I don't want you stepping into that role. Most of us are not qualified to do that. There's a lot that goes into it, including state licensure. So, like, it's a big deal. And there's a reason it is. And so, really, what it's about is it's about understanding some of the common themes around trauma and what may or may not, be something that can help support someone who may have had this previous experience of trauma. And what's really cool is even if it's someone who hasn't experienced trauma, these are also just really good traits to make sure we're actually supporting our employees as well. So do not ask people to tell their story. It is always, always, always up to them when and if they share. And I'm a big proponent of that. And then also, a trauma informed workplace doesn't mean you get to like come trauma dump on your HR professionals or your
Yeah.
leaders. I'm kind of sensitive to the reverse of that because, I have been like personally like traumatized, like secondary trauma from like people just like wandering into my office and telling me like truly the most unhinged stuff.
Yeah.
Um, So I think that that's a really important thing. But some of the tools that we look at, and this is where those principles are really helpful, is it's like, so how do we support someone feeling safe in our
Mm,
workplace? Are they physically safe? Are they psychologically safe? I know that's our sexy term. We like to talk about psychological safety, but no one actually does it. And
no.
then financially safe. And that's one people always overlook. Are we financially safe? People go to work to pay their bills and support themselves and their families. If someone is worried about making their rent payment, their mortgage payment, putting food on the table,
Yeah.
they are not safe. I don't care how great your employee engagement score is. And so that's, the first principle. Like we think through as we're working with someone, are we creating a space that is safe on several levels? And then, from that, we're thinking about trust and transparency. Are we building trust? Are we being thoughtfully transparent? Are we building places for people to build relationships with others, even if it's just a relationship of working together productively? It's also really important that we understand power dynamics when it comes to the workplace.
Yep.
I think power dynamics specifically, if a leader is looking at how can I explore how to be a better, more trauma informed leader, I think it's exploring your own relationship with power and the power
Mm,
you have in your organization. Because at the root of a traumatic experience is an imbalance of power and a removal of choice. And so anyone's traumatic experience is about an imbalance of power.
yeah.
Think about it. Even if it's a natural disaster, the weather, nature is more powerful than us, and we do not have control over that situation. If
Yeah.
we're a leader in an organization, and people count on us to do their performance reviews, to decide on, bonuses, promotions,
Yeah.
whether we keep our job, that's a pretty significant power imbalance. And so it changes the relationship. And the thing that sucks is most of us are really, really bad at understanding the power we have within the context of a lot of relationships. And so I think that is one thing to really sit with. It's super uncomfortable, but I
Yeah.
think it's really powerful. I also think if you just want to do something easy, relatively easy, and definitely free, is find ways to create choice for your team members. So, talk about that power imbalance and the lack of choice. When we give people choice, we avoid that harm and that re traumatization. And choice doesn't mean like, hey, go do whatever you want. It means giving them choice of how they do something, when they do something, like the steps they take, like saying this or that. And listen, I get it. Sometimes we can't give a choice. If we can't, explain why. And just that one move, like think to yourself, how can I create choice for my team right here? I promise you is a game changer. If everyone just started doing that, we would be operating in a very different world of work.
Yeah, you brought up so much good stuff that I was like processing through the choice piece. I was thinking about because you were talking about like financial safety, and I was thinking about like how expensive it has become to drive anywhere because gas
Yep.
prices are so high. And then you followed
Mhm.
it up with like choice, and I'm like, the clear choice to me is like letting your employees choose whether or not they want to physically commute somewhere or not. Because that cost is a lot right now, and people aren't necessarily thinking about how that's impacting people's safety.
Right.
And that was like the thing that just like popped up for me in my head as you were talking about all of that. There's so much good stuff. The whole season's about like this HR evolution, right? Why do you think trauma informed practice is becoming a bigger part of where HR is headed rather than just like a nice to have or niche specialty?
I think it's twofold. So I think number one, I think it's super obvious to all of us at this
Hmm.
point that all of our relationships to work changed during the pandemic and after the pandemic. And one of the things we see, it's kind of like this clear moment where we have all of these changing relationships with work. We have Gen Z entering the workforce in droves. I love Gen Z. And the expectation around mental health and support and being a genuine version of yourself at work is wildly different than it was 5 or 6 years ago. It is night and day. And I think we have come to this place where I feel like a lot of HR professionals and a lot of leaders feel like they are stepping into the role of mental health professional. And that is not the correct solution. It is not fair to anyone involved. And we have to have a
Definitely.
better solution. Trauma informed focuses on the processes, the systems, and the culture that we build that really
Yeah.
scaffolds these trauma informed behaviors. And it doesn't ask managers and HR leaders to step into these roles that were really never meant for them anyway. So I
Yeah.
think that is something that is why this really is the right moment for this. When I
Yeah.
think about HR specifically, I'm a big believer. You've heard, I say it all the time, system, processes, all those things. HR is the architect of so much of that in the organization. So, an HR leader investing in being trauma informed and building people systems in that way amplifies this work more than I think any other leader or profession in any organization. So that is why I think this is so powerful. It's the right moment. And I think it's really the right person, the right skill set in the organization, meeting that opportunity together.
I totally agree. What I'm so curious to know, like, what is a piece of like the standard HR process, which like could be like performance reviews, PIPs, exit interviews, whatever, that's quietly re-traumatizing people? And how would you rebuild
Ooh,
it? I'm so
ooh,
like
this
you're
is
you're
such
talking
a
about us being
good question.
I know you were talking about us being architects, and I was like, I for sure think there are parts of HR that definitely re-traumatize people.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like so many. Like two that come to mind first. I think the really like top of mind one for me right now is the hiring process because
Mm,
so many people are having such bad experiences
yep.
around hiring. And I think the biggest thing that I find with hiring processes is the lack of transparency and the lack of like reciprocity in
Mm,
that relationship. And I think, there's, the whole AI technology side of it. I think there are amazing recruiting and HR leaders who actually build processes that respect candidates, which, by the way, is great business too,
hmm.
because it has something to do with not only your employment brand, but also your business brand as well, and the relationship you can have with people. But I think so much of it is traumatizing because you have two things kind of happening. You are out of control. You can't, like, you're looking for a job, you want to
Mm.
have something happening, and it's also connected to your finances. Whether or not you have a job is connected to our finances,
And your healthcare,
regardless.
and your healthcare, which is a big,
This is like halfway, like, this is probably another conversation, but I really need like HR and workplaces to stop trying, like, stop being the solve for societal problems that we should be fixing. Like, healthcare. Oh, employers provide healthcare, really? And then, like, the whole, like, people like come back into the office because we need community. I'm like, actually, aren't there places outside of work where we should be building community? Like,
yeah.
what, like, we shouldn't have to replace everything that humans need in the workplace. Unfortunately, we're asked to do it, especially
Yeah.
as HR professionals. But I really think the hiring process is a big one. And I think the biggest thing is creating clarity, clear expectations, transparency around the process. And I think there's so much we can learn. I mean, I used to be kind of one of those hard ass HR people. If you would have told me send questions in advance, I'd been like, get real. But I've heard so many smart people tell me why this is important for, accessibility and hiring the right candidate. I'm like, you know what? I was wrong. And that's a big part of being trauma informed is like, you know what? That didn't serve everyone the best, including me and my organization. Like, when we can do that, we continue to build so much better.
Yeah.
The other area, this is kind of a hot button for me, but the other area is investigations.
Ooh.
Investigations, when we're investigating issues of harassment, issues of misconduct, that is like a hot mess experience for employees. It's kind of anything to do with employee relations. I'd even extend it to, leaves of absence or things like that. It's something that HR professionals deal with all the time. Like, I
Yes.
remember my job was just employee relations, and I would like hand someone FMLA paperwork like once a day at a
Yeah.
certain point in my career. It was something that was so kind of like automatic. And for the person on the other end, it is probably a very once in a lifetime experience
Yeah.
and could be something, really traumatic, really concerning, something bad happening. And like that mismatch in energy is really an area I think that can be a challenge. Like having someone come and tell you, I'm really nervous or uncomfortable to report this, or I'm really nervous or uncomfortable to be part of an investigation. I'm worried I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
Just creating clarity, transparency around that process and making people sure people know, like, hey, this is how this works. Here's what you can expect. It hugely, hugely helpful. But it's a lot. If you've ever been on the other end of an investigation
Oh, yeah.
as an HR professional, like especially if it's an outside attorney, because they are tricky sometimes. They'll be like, "Oh, hi," and I'm like, "Really? Did you just ask me that? Are we gonna fight
There's,
now?"
yeah.
But like, it is really something that can be incredibly traumatizing, especially when you look at some of the behaviors that get normalized within organizations and within society.
Yeah, the also like if you think about an investigation, you have to go collect the details of like what happened. Even asking somebody what happened could re-traumatize them in a really bad way.
Yeah.
And investigations are tough. When I made this post on LinkedIn that went viral, like, or not LinkedIn, on TikTok that went viral like a while ago. But it was like, what's one thing your HR team did that made you never trust them again? And a lot of the comments, like probably 90% of them, if I were to sort through them, if I could do that, was about like them reporting something and the employee getting fired, like sexual harassment getting reported and the employee getting fired, someone's manager screaming at them, the employee getting fired. And so I just
Uh-huh.
think about that already because I'm like, we already struggle with like trust, people trusting us, right? Like every day you get on this internet and someone's like, don't trust HR. And I'm like, I don't disagree because like the average HR team, you probably shouldn't trust. Like you could trust me, but like even me, I try to do my best and I might be susceptible to like making a mistake here and there that could hurt an employee in a way that I never intended for, right? Like we're
And
not infallible.
totally, totally. And I think, as much as it's a little bit hurtful, a little bit painful to hear, don't trust HR. I also think it's important for us as HR professionals to remember most of that's not actually about us personally. It's
Yeah.
about someone who did harm in an
Yes.
HR role. And
Yep.
like, I was an HR professional for a long time. I experienced other HR leaders who made racist comments. I
Same.
experienced other HR leaders who did not take things seriously. Like,
Same.
there are people actively doing harm and with intention, not to mention, people who maybe don't have the right resources or the
Hmm.
right support and they are doing unintentional harm, which by the way is still harm. And you see all of these people expressing don't trust HR. Well, that's not an indictment of you. It's an indictment of the workplace because also HR is the scapegoat of the
Mm,
workplace and how employees are treated. That don't trust HR and, everyone hates HR. It is not an indictment of the people doing the work really well and trying to change workplaces. Like, those are like the heroes of the workplace. That's why I think, HR professionals can really lead this trauma informed movement. It's about the workplace doesn't work. And your CEO comes in and says, hey, do this really crappy layoff thing because I don't want to have to do it myself. And also, like, that's your job.
yeah.
It's about workplaces. It's not really about HR.
Yeah. Oh, I needed to hear that today because they be making me angry on the internet sometimes because I'm like, come on, this is like way more nuanced, like than anyone realizes until you've done this job. Like I think all my colleagues have heard me rant about this. Like I'm so tired of people also giving advice that they shouldn't be giving on the internet, and that causes also a bunch of harm for us in our job. Or like just I could that's a whole nother episode waiting to happen. You'll come back for part two.
Oh,
For
yes.
for the HR person who does want to bring this like trauma informed energy into their workplace, but has zero budget and potentially a skeptical leadership team, because I do feel like a lot of leaders, I don't know why, are skeptical of things that we want to do. What would the first move be?
Yeah, I think is get informed, get some more information. I obviously, I talk about it and write about it a lot. I try and write about it and talk about it from the lens of how do we actually make this work in the corporate world. But there's also a ton of other amazing resources out there. A book that I always recommend is What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah, which is interesting. It's kind of like a conversation between them, but it's a really accessible way to understand trauma and its impact on individuals. A lot of people recommend The Body Keeps the Score.
Yep.
It is a very important work. There's a whole separate conversation we can have about that book and the person who wrote it. But I also think, just from a reading perspective, it is like clinical as hell. It is not an easy read. It's not accessible. And I think the accessibility aspect of this, talking about this in a way, you actually talk to another human being, is an important aspect of that. There's also a lot of other really amazing people talking about this work. Catherine Manning is a former Justice Department victims rights advocate. Katie Kurtz does a lot of incredible work around trauma informed practices as well. There are a ton of people having these conversations, and there's tons of free resources and books out there. And if anyone's curious, like, hit me up, let me know. I get it. I understand the budgets are tight. And honestly, actually, I also sponsor a monthly scholarship to one of my certification programs. So that is also an option as well. If you're interested, sign up for a scholarship. There's tons of resources out there. The biggest thing I would say, the advice I give anyone starting a trauma informed journey within an organization, is start from an area of strength in the organization. So,
Mm.
for example, I brought up safety is kind of that first principle of trauma informed workplaces. So, if you worked in a manufacturing company or a construction company, and safety, physical safety, because of OSHA requirements, is
Hmm.
already a big priority,
Yep.
think about how you can build on that safety culture, that safety language, to expand on to psychological and financial safety, and kind of broaden that from there. Because this is something that can be challenging to gain buy in, build from an area of strength. Empowerment is another principle, and that includes um, personal growth and development, leveraging strengths, recognition, and choice. You probably have a budget for leadership development, learning and development in your organization, a passion around that. What if you shifted and kind of
Mm.
thought around how we can improve this? And an important aspect of it is time to the data that we have. We have data around engagement. We have data around growth and empowerment. We have data around the power of psychological safety. So
Yeah.
tying it back to those business outcomes, and something you already have some buy in within the organization, I think, is a great place to start. It's super hard if, you have an organization that's really, really like cloak and dagger, really doesn't want to share information. I would not start with trust and transparency. Like,
Mm.
that is going to be a huge uphill battle. Start from
Yeah.
an area of strength and then build from there. And it makes it much easier, because really this is about cultural change, which we all know is a lift.
Yeah. Those are all excellent resources. Can I tell you a story about the Body Keeps Score? I did not read it.
Yes.
Sorry. I did
It's,
not read it,
I
but
don't
I'm
blame you. It's a lot.
but I'm very familiar with the concept. It was like, like everyone's talking about social media and stuff. But this year was my dad's, the seventh anniversary of my dad passing. And the day snuck up on me without me realizing. So I woke up one morning and I was just like in a foul mood. And I was like, I'm in a foul mood. And I like was just like in a bad mood for like half the day before I realized it was the day, like the anniversary of his passing. And I was like, damn, the body do be keeping score. Cause like
It
I
does.
had not thought about it until I was like on the phone later. Like I was getting ready to call my mom and I was like, I have to call her about something. And I remembered what day it was. And I was like, wow, 7 years. And this is like the first year that I've missed kind of like that waking reminder. Grief is so funny because you feel it every day. And then you like wake up on anniversary days and you're like, I grieve every day. So like anniversary days is like kind of a little worse because you're like, I remember this very specific thing. But I didn't really know if I believed in the body kept score theory until that day where I like
Mhm.
literally sat down and I was like, holy shit, my like body remembers that this is the day that I experienced so much trauma in finding out he passed. And it was kind of
Mhm.
wild. Opened up my eyes. I was like, wow.
Eh, it's so interesting too. And it's like the big things, absolutely, we kind of capture that. And, people often think of the body keeping the score or someone being triggered or activated. They think of someone with PTSD. I always talk about, fireworks and people who were in a war zone or people who
Yes.
were in active shooting. Like that can be very, like your body kept the score of that. And that is, creating that reaction. But something that might be a little bit more relatable for people is, have you ever smelled something? Like you get
Yes.
a whiff of like a smell and it like takes you back to a specific moment.
Yes.
That
Lots
is
of
your body
times.
keeping the score too. It is all
Mm,
of these, your senses are picking up on things and they're making connections in your brain to generally to extreme moments because it is, it's evolutionary. It's like, how do we survive in this world? And what kind of sucks is, your amygdala doesn't know the difference between being stressed out because a bear was right in front of you and you got a like salty email from your boss or a client because it triggers the same stress responses. And understanding that can be really helpful in managing ourself first, kind of going like, oh, okay, like let me take a moment, let me step back. And then also understanding like, why is someone doing this? Like if
yeah.
you ever, and a lot of times, if you want to open up a whole nother can of worms, the work around adverse childhood experiences and the impact adverse childhood experience or childhood trauma has on not only kind of mental health well-being, but also actual physical health outcomes is staggering. And there's a ton of great information around that. Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, she was California's first Surgeon General. She pioneered work around this, and she's a physician. And she wrote a book called The
Mm,
Deepest Well, which is fascinating. But she also has a really great 10-minute TED Talk if you're not a big book reader. It really explains adverse child experiences and ACEs and how sometimes some of those trauma responses that are showing up for you, they might be something from your childhood that's not connecting. And maybe like it doesn't make a ton of sense. But those moments in our childhood have like an extensive and expansive kind of fingerprint on our behaviors and the rest of our lives.
yeah, I really need to go to therapy right now. You're talking to me, and I'm like, I need to contact my therapist. I need to
I
have a
always love it. I'm like,
conversation.
wow, I talked to Stephanie and I really feel like I need to go to therapy
I need to
now.
go there. I need to go talk to someone about these things. Like, I can't just talk to my best friend about them all the time. Because again, she's not a licensed therapist, and people can't come to me and talk to me about things in HR because, like, I can't be a therapist. But I'm like thinking about this a lot because like our job in HR is like not to diagnose or even treat trauma. Like we're not qualified to do that. Very
Uh-huh,
inappropriate in my opinion.
uh-huh.
Where's the line though? Like how can I stay trauma informed without falling into the let me play therapist and be like, hey, maybe that's a childhood stress response. Not that I would ever do that, but that was my one example.
Mhm. I think one of the things that I've noticed is I am a problem solver. Like a lot
Mm,
of us who have gotten into this are problem solvers and are really good at
same.
like solving people problems.
Yeah.
Like I noticed again with the help of my therapist, Marianne. She's a Betty. Shout out Marianne.
We love
Um,
Mariette.
so with the help of my therapist, I noticed like this kind of it's almost like enabling people behavior. Like it shows up in my personal life too. Like I'm going to get in the middle about any disagreements my brother has with my parents or whatever, and then this person and that.
Mm,
And it's like, I'm going to swoop in and save them. Like, first of all, like that sucks. Like, why am I doing this? This is terrible. But also, it's actually not trauma informed because you are not empowering someone to do it themselves. So that is the key. It's how do we provide the support, the tools and resources to get people what they need. We are not solving their problems, because if we solve their problems for them, we're just like those like helicopter parents who are keeping their children from building resilience because they're not letting them fail. So
Yeah.
we don't want to step into that. And we also need to respect our own boundaries. If someone wants to tell us about like the worst thing that ever happened to them, I'm sorry. Like, I don't have the emotional space to deal with that on a random like Wednesday afternoon. Like, that's not appropriate. And then there's also the aspect of like, what is our actual role in the
Yeah.
business?
Yeah.
Like, what is our role in the business and what are we supposed to do? And sometimes it's just like, hey, what are you asking someone, what are you asking me to do for you in this moment? Like, what would you like from me? And people are sometimes taken aback, but I found that to be incredibly helpful. And like, hey, what are you actually looking
Yeah.
from me in this moment? And here is what is appropriate and is what is appropriate.
Yeah. It's
Um,
so funny you say that because I tell people to like control their responses in between meetings. Like, where I'm like, if I had a hard meeting or like a very creatively draining meeting, my next meeting shouldn't be like a super serious, like that kind of thing. I was just imagining as you were talking, like, imagine you're coming out from like a stressful meeting and you go into the meeting with the employee and they tell you something about like a trauma or something that happened to them either in their childhood, recently, something that was triggered, and you yourself are at like mental capacity and can't even reply correctly to them. Like, I don't ever claim to be 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 every day. I'm a work in progress, but also like I care so deeply about my employees. I don't want to hurt them, but sometimes these random things happen in between meetings. Like, I was just thinking about like, I don't even know if I would be able to like properly respond. I would have to like take a minute and be like, I need a minute break before I could even be in the right space to say something.
I'm a big believer that a lot of HR burnout is actually fueled by secondary trauma and compassion fatigue because we do not have the boundaries from the workplace to actually navigate people just coming in and telling us like the wildest stories. Like, I remember I was 20 and someone came and told me they were worried their baby was just going to fall out of them. And I was like, I don't think that's how it works. Or people will tell you about like terrible things that they have
Yes.
happen. And it's
Yes.
just like, and they just like come in hot. Or I remember I had this lady who like every 3 days would come into my office and weep because no one went to lunch with her. And I'm like, eventually I was like, I'm really sorry, but what do you want me to do? Like, what are you like? And it's this combination of, secondary trauma. You hear about these really terrible experiences. Imagine the
Yeah.
people who were doing investigations during Me Too. Like, they heard about some really, really terrible stuff.
Mm,
Like, that actually has the same impact on our body and minds as actually experiencing the trauma directly. This wild. And compassion fatigue is over and over and over again. You're handing out FMLA paperwork every day, or someone's coming into your office every day to vent or complain. And it's just eventually you're just numb. You're like, I cannot care anymore. And we so often associate these with, first responders. But HR people are navigating this and they don't have the right supports. Instead, you have,
mm.
you know, your CEO or a manager going, well, that's your job. You have to deal with the people part of it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. You actually have to deal with the people you work with too.
I mean, like, I would agree with you. I do feel like there's HR burnout was like so high during COVID. And it's going to be studied someday. Somebody is going
Uh-huh.
to do some study on HR people, compassion fatigue, secondary trauma during COVID in the 2020. I just authored the paper right now. There's the title. But like, it was so real. So many people were leaving the workplace. So many people were tired. I was exhausted in a way that I genuinely don't think I've ever been that exhausted in my life. I can't even describe it. It was like in my bones, was how I used to say it. Like the exhaustion had seeped so deep into me that I was exhausted in my bones. And like, what should we do then as HR? Like, I know we can say like, hey, we can draw the boundary, but what else would you recommend we do if like someone listening feels that way right now?
Yeah, I think if you're listening and you feel that way right now, like you need support. And you need like support from, I know we talk about the EAP. We could have a whole other conversation about employee assistance program.
Hmm.
But what
Hmm.
access, what support do you have? Maybe it's peer support. So, safe space, other communities that we see come up, just having someone who has had similar experiences to you to be able to relate to talk to know you're not alone can be really supportive in these environments. And then I think it's, restructuring, how you're spending your day, your time, and really finding ways to kind of pour back into yourself. Self care, not the Gwyneth Paltrow self care where we're like, steaming our hoo-haws or whatever. We're talking about like actual, real, legitimate self care. We're investing in our physical, mental, spiritual well being. I always really wanted to call out the steaming hoo-ha nonsense, and I knew I could do it here.
Dying. You could definitely do it here. I don't. Why is Gwyneth Paltrow giving any sort of wellness advice? I thought we proved Goop wasn't even real. Sorry, allegedly not real. Do not come for me, Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm not interested.
That's how I know I've made it, is when I get my first cease and desist from Gwyneth.
My first cease and desist will come from Mel Robbins because I can't stop talking about how
Oh,
much I dislike Mel Robbins.
oh, we should have a whole separate conversation about that because, yes.
Not me talking about how much I dislike Mel Robbins on a work call and then my coworker's wife coming in with the book to hand it to her husband and me being like,
Stop.
I really don't like Mel Robbins. Fraud. That's all I'm going to say. She's a
Yeah.
fraud. I'm sorry. If you read Let Them and you liked it, I encourage you to do your research on Mel Robbins as a person. Allegedly, do not come for me. Actually, please serve me a cease and desist. I would also like a cease and desist from just like a new segment I'm going to do. Who would I like a cease and desist from?
Isn't it
Here are
fun?
my other two. Workday and Sherm. I would love both of them to serve me with papers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love this. Yes.
I know, Stephanie, who else would you add on your list? We got Goops, Gwyneth Paltrow, Mel Robbins, Sherm, and Workday. What else is on our cease and desist list? They're serving us
I don't
in this
know. Like
regard.
mine are really personal. Like I'm like,
Oh,
it's like a list of enemies, which just seems
yeah.
very out of character, but I have an Aries moon. I don't know what else to say.
We're not going to out your list of enemies on this podcast, but afterwards, I would like you to text me this list of enemies.
Okay.
Okay. Final question of the episode. If someone listening to this, if someone listens to this, why am I writing these as if someone is not listening to this? Like, what is wrong
I
with me?
mean, people listen to this. You're kind of a big deal.
Don't scare me. For people listening to this, if they want to do one thing differently tomorrow, just one thing, what would you want that one thing to be
I would say the
when it
one
comes to trauma
thing,
informed?
I think it's find
Obviously.
ways to give people choice in all aspects of your life. How can you create choice?
Mm.
It is free. It is a single question. You can stop and check yourself. I know I said it earlier, but if everyone did that, we would be living in a wildly different world. And real choice, not the perception of choice, actual genuine choice where there's not a repercussion for choosing something you don't like.
You're going to come back on an episode in the future about choice because I have really been on my choose your own adventure kick and I really want to do an episode about what choice looks like in the workplace. Okay, I'm writing that down for the
Oh,
next season. For
yes,
people who want
please.
to get in touch with you, I mean,
Yes.
I just DM you and text you and annoy you all the time. But for other people who want to get in touch with you who are not me, how would they do that?
Yeah, I would say find me on LinkedIn. You can slide into the DMs. You can find me on my website, thewoundedworkforce.com. You can find my Substack, The Resilience Myth. And you can also email me at stephanie@thewoundedworkforce.com.
So pumped. I didn't even know you had a Substack. I will have to go. I don't do Substack a lot, but I might do one for just my musings. If you're listening to this episode and you would love to subscribe to yet another thing I do, a newsletter about my musings, please tell me if this would be a hit or a miss. Looking
My
forward to
vote is
hearing from all of
yes.
you.
Maybe it should be like a Substack where you also like name who you want to get a cease and desist from, because that is, I feel like that's a fun, You're like, I'm actually going to
leave this.
bait the cease and desist.
I'm actually going to like leave this podcast episode and record a TikTok about this. Like my friend and I were just recording a podcast episode and we talked about who we would want to receive a cease and desist from in no particular order. Here are my 5. I guess we'll have to watch this TikTok. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. Anyway, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me. It's always an honor. You're definitely going to be back on that choice episode. I wrote it down in my notes, so it's happening. For everybody else, if you like this podcast, you should definitely subscribe to it. Fun facts. I have an event in California. I love that I'm now remembering to tell everyone about this. I have this event happening in California called the Safe Space Summit in October. If you're interested in applying, I'll put the link in the show notes and maybe we can meet up in California with some people. How about that? That's a great way to end this episode. Okay, bye everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.